Don't Starve Together has many different characters, each providing a different experience. But the question many people wonder is just how different of an experience does each survivor bring to the table? And what role do certain survivors play in the grand scheme of things? Well, today we're going to answer that. Join me as we do a deep dive into every single character's quirks, skills, and traits to see what role they play in this strange game known as Don't Starve Together, using this fun graph that I'm about to go over here in a second. So, how exactly will we be defining each survivor's role? That's actually pretty simple. To the left and right, we will be trying to determine if the survivor is solo-orientated or a team player. Determining this is pretty hard because Klei has actually done a great job of making it so that every single survivor brings something unique that can help the team out. So instead, this graph will depend more on the meta playstyle. So for example, if a character is best played selfishly, they would lean farther left on the chart. If the character absolutely shines with a team, they would move farther right. Okay, so what about up and down? This one may seem a little more confusing, but trust me, I'm about to explain it so perfectly that you will immediately want to leave a like on this video and subscribe because of my, excellent speaking skills. Anyways, to the top we have early game, and to the bottom we have late game. Now, some of you may have already figured this out, but early game survivors are basically survivors that come ready to go. If a survivor peaks right out of the portal, then they are an early game survivor. Late game survivors are survivors that require setup to actually become powerful and have their full potential. They will generally underperform in the beginning, but become a powerhouse later down the line. And of course, there's everything in between. This fancy little graph will give us a decent idea of what role each character plays. For example, a character far left and towards the top is an amazing solo DPS character, whereas a character far right and towards the bottom is a team-based character that needs a little bit of TLC to become powerful. It doesn't give us the full scope of the character, that I will go over when we cover each character individually. I just wanted to include it because, well, it's a graph, and I'm a nerd. I love graphs. Anyways, let's finally begin the video with our favorite default character, Wilson. Now, Wilson is a bit of an interesting character. You know that saying, jack of all trades, master of none? Yeah, so Wilson is a jack of no trades and master of none. He's quite literally as default as you can get. And that's okay. That's what he's meant to be. Prior to his skill tree, Wilson was actually even more bland, with his only perk being his beard. But thanks to his skill tree, Wilson actually has become a rather invaluable asset. No, it's not because he can throw torches or because he can store food in his beard. It's actually thanks to his transmutation skill tree. Many Wilson mains will always max out this tree, and for a good reason. It's his most useful tree by far, especially in a group situation. Many Wilsons will find themselves being a pseudo-wormwood, creating resources from other resources to keep others in the camp happy. But funny enough, these transmutation skills don't need others to shine, being just as useful solo. But of course, the fact that he can be useful in a team setting gives him a minor boost towards the team player side of things. So we know that Wilson is useful both to himself and his team, but how is he early versus late game? Obviously, Wilson is mostly as good as he comes fresh out of the portal, with his only quirks being his skills and beard. The beard does take some time to grow, but come on, let's be honest, it really doesn't make that much of a difference and can actually be dangerous in summer. So Wilson lands himself right about here on the graph. Yeah, he's pretty average. I don't know what you expected. Next up is the fire starter turned firefighter, Willow. Now, Willow is a bit of an interesting character, but ever since her rework and subsequent skill tree, Willow has been one of, if not the best team-orientated character in the entire game. Trust me, she went from being a character that would be insta-banned to being one of your new best friends. Is your base burning down? Never fear, Willow is here. Is your sanity looking rough and your lights fading? Never fear, Willow is here. She's basically a required character to have running around your world during summer if wildfires aren't turned off. She's an amazing team player to have around, if you aren't fighting something that is, since willows tend to light whatever they are fighting on fire, which is something that can damage any non-willow player. but that doesn't invalidate the pure usefulness that she has. Willow has a lot of power, that's for sure, but all of her power is concentrated towards early game. Really, all Willow needs to unlock her true potential is a killer bee biome. Yeah, that's it. Once a Willow finds one of those, then they have peaked and become as powerful as they will be for their entire run. Of course, this doesn't factor natural progression, but her entire character design is basically be as powerful as possible, as soon as possible. All of what we said so far lands Willow right about here on the graph. She's basically one of the best support/crowd control characters there are in the game. Next up is the macho man himself, Wolfgang. This hulking, potato-loving beast of a man is probably exactly what you think when you think about solo-orientated characters. Don't get me wrong, Wolfgangs are great to have around because, they can handle most threats with ease, but they quite literally need no one else to shine whatsoever. A Wolfgang could spawn in and run off on their own and never meet with any of the other survivors and be totally fine. His whole niche is basically being the DPS character. That's okay, of course, and it can help others, but not all the time. I think we all know where this will land him on the graph. Wolfgang also is pretty much as powerful as he comes right when he exits the florid postern. Use that dumbbell you spawned in with, and boom, there you go. Peak Wolfgang, ready to do what Wolfgang does best: combat. It's going to be no surprise that Wolfgang is right here on the graph. He's the true fighter of the group. Next up, we have our favorite depressed child, Wendy. And at the time of making this video, her skill tree is yet to be released, but it is currently in the process of getting released. And so far, it seems like the skill tree is alright. It's unique for sure, but it doesn't change her playstyle that much. Wendy was, and seemingly will be, a great solo-orientated character. She needs no one else to shine but her twin sister Abigail, who pretty much carries her through most situations. Unfortunately, neither her nor Abigail can directly help others in any way that any other character cannot. Wendy is also a character that so far seems like she peaks early game, with no snowball ability really at all. You enter through the portal, use Abby, and pretty much wait for her to reach level 3. I know I'm talking like she's a weak character, she's really not. In fact, she's one of the stronger characters in the game thanks to Abby. But she still lands herself right about here. She's pretty much a solo character that got stuck in a multiplayer game, with no real synergies that I can think of. Next up, we have the soulless automaton, WX78. And while they have a massive array of circuits, some being able to drastically help their team, literally none of them get used. Instead, many WX mains opt for the combo of Moggle vision and speed circuits. Ironically, this is in character for WX, as they, don't really care about the organics, and is one of the more selfish members of the cast lore-wise. So WX is capable of being a team player, and there are some out there that do utilize those funny little selfless circuits, but unfortunately WX is just naturally going to fall towards the solo-orientated side. That being said, WX does require some preparation to reach their true power, requiring scans and of course the circuits that come from those scans. It doesn't take a lot of work, but it's still far more work than some others on this list. So WX lands themselves right about here on the graph. Could be a great support character, but generally never is. Phenomenal quality of life though. I mean, you can literally just never worry about darkness, which I'm not gonna lie, as a Wilson main, I kind of get jealous. Next up, we have the not-so-battle grandma, Wickerbottom, who, funny enough, used to be one of the best characters in the game, but unfortunately for her, one of her majorly unique traits, which was her books, were stolen by a certain magician. Wickerbottom is still a phenomenal solo character, but in her current state with no skill tree, she's actually better with others. Many of Wickerbottom's books are team-orientated, with books for gardening being the most prominent, and she thrives with a Maxwell on the team to utilize her books, since he can do so with far less penalty thanks to his dapperness. Wickerbottom is, in her current state, actually a pretty intricate character, who does require some decent setup, which mostly comprises of reed farming, to reach her full potential. Wickerbottom lands herself right about here on the graph. She basically is made to help others, and is one of the few true support classes that this game offers. Next up, we have the actual jack of all trades, Woody. Now, Woody is quite literally one of the most team-orientated characters there is in this entire game. Werebeaver's useful for, resources. Weregoose is one of the best scouting tools in the entire game, and when it comes to Weremoose, Woody actually shines when fighting as a group. And this is because Woody actually needs to be healed externally to heal at all. Yes, it's a small thing, but something that actually makes Woody thrive in a team experience while fighting. While, it's all still viable solo as well. Woody is also a character that takes incredibly little setup to peak in power, with him only needing to collect monster meat, a task that's equivalent to Willow's needs but slightly easier. So Woody lands right here on the graph. The jack of all trades that actually is very helpful to have around. Also, thank you guys so much for giving me the wooden helmets and the walking canes. I love you guys. Next up is the speechless mime, Wes. Now, Wes is a bit of an interesting character, but one that requires no one else to reach his true potential. Sure, he can actually help others with his speed balloons, but he doesn't need others. And unfortunately, a Wes can actually be a drain on others' resources, thanks to his higher drain on durability and hunger. Wes is meant to be a challenge character, and one that ironically thrives alone, where he doesn't have to share any resources with anyone but himself, and doesn't hinder anyone else either. Wes, much like Wilson, also comes out of the postern as powerful as he gets. He's even able to craft his balloons right off the bat, and this makes Wes peak at early game. And it also lands him right around here on the graph. I don't know what to say about Wes, he's just the challenge character. Next up, we have the antagonist turned survivor, Maxwell. This dapper man is amazing to have on a team. In combat, his cage makes for easy boss fights. Outside of combat, his minions collect so many resources that it puts Werebeaver to shame. And if that wasn't enough, he even has the ability to read Wickerbottom's books for basically no cost, since his sanity regens so fast anyway. Maxwell, much like many of the characters here, also comes out of the postern as strong as he really ever will be. His Codex Umbra is his power. So yeah, honestly, this was kind of tough, but I would put Maxwell right about here. He's the squishy mage of the group who's invaluable, but can make others feel useless with just how useful he actually is. Next up, the Valkyrie warrior, Wigfrid. Wigfrid is a bit interesting. Thanks to her rework and skill tree, she actually went from an early game powerhouse fighter to a surprisingly strong support and fighter hybrid. Her songs are capable of buffing those around her and making combat enjoyable for pretty much everyone involved, except her enemies, of course. Wigfrid also now has significantly more snowball involved, with her songs requiring some pretty major prep to create. That doesn't mean she isn't powerful right out of the postern, because she is, but she won't be at her full potential until she gathers lots of interesting and sometimes hard to find items. So she gets to go right here on the graph. A perfect fighter and support hybrid that ages well into late game. Next up, we have Weber. And oh boy do I feel bad for Weber mains right now. So look, at the time of making this video, Weber is actually just awful to have around, and I'm so sorry for saying that. Don't get me wrong, he's an amazing character if you are playing solo. Weber actually doesn't have any good synergies with anybody except other Webers, and when playing with others will tend to cause servers to lag exponentially. It hurts, but as of right now, Webers are best utilized solo, for their and everyone around them's sake. Weber does require a little setup to become powerful, but really once you get some nurse switcherdoodles, you're golden. Weber lands right about here, the unfortunate summoner role who's doomed because of poor optimization. I'm hoping that when his skill tree comes out, Klei will do something about spiders nuking servers. Next up, we have the mechanic, Winona. Winona is all about engineering your way around difficult tasks. Sure, she's useful to have around, but really, Winona benefits herself the most out of all the characters around her. She seems team-orientated at first glance thanks to stuff like her spotlights, but when you really look at how to play Winona efficiently, you'll notice that it's meant to be a little more selfish. As for whether she's a late game character, I mean, come on, it's obvious. She's probably the most late game character in the entire game. Winona lands herself right around here, the somewhat selfish engineer of the group. Next up, we have the Constant's only chef, Worley. Where do I even start with Worley, man? Do I even have to say anything? It's obvious that Worley is the most selfless character in the entire game. Sure, he can be played solo, but he only really thrives in a team, where he can feed others his amazing dishes with his even more amazing seasonings. Worley also takes some decent setup to become good. Actually, quite a bit of setup. You need farms, and not just the crop kind, to make this man as powerful as he can be. Worley lands himself right about here. In my opinion, he is the support role, and I really hope Klei doesn't change that with his skill tree because honestly it fits him so well. Though I am still excited to see what they do with his skill tree. Next up, we have the mischievous imp, Wortox, who just recently has received a very interesting skill tree. But a skill tree that doesn't change the fact that Wortox is, and presumably always will be, a support team-based character. Naughty Wortoxes will help their team out by being able to utilize the knapsack and no longer needing to eat mortal food since sanity isn't an issue with souls anymore. And nice Wortoxes will provide extra healing on the battlefield and very, very cheap revives. Wortox, whether he likes it or not, is one of the most team-orientated characters in the game. As for late game, well, thanks to the new skill tree, Wortox actually does require some setup. But it's far less than, say, Worley or Winona's setup. So he gets to go right here. He's kind of like a scout support character to me, to be honest. Next up, we have our favorite plant boy, Wormwood. And many people assume that Wormwood is the lovable farming character who's there to mass produce living logs and be a true support character. And while that's true, Wormwood is actually also a very powerful fighting character, with an entire portion of his skill tree dedicated to combat. Wormwood can play both fields, but generally, of course, Wormwoods are team-orientated. Wormwood also does require some pretty massive setup. Not only is one of his strongest armors, the Brambleshade armor, locked behind rifts, but he also generally needs to just have a lot of time to produce his massive amount of value. So Wormwood goes right here. The support character that can very easily be played as a great fighter as well. Next up, we have the fish girl, Wirt. Wirt is basically the perfect solo character. Even with her skill tree, she really only benefits other Wirt players. For example, in a populated server, Wirts will generally branch off, find a swamp, and never leave again except to collect kelp. Wirt is also a character that takes a lot of time to snowball. She's powerful and has the potential to be one of the most powerful characters in the game, but the grind when it comes to Wirt gameplay is real. Wirt lands herself right about here on the graph. She's an empire builder, but a selfish one. Next up, we have another recent recipient of a skill tree and world-famous scout, Walter. Now, I'll be honest, Walter's skill tree made him incredibly powerful and finally a viable pick in the meta. But it didn't change him fundamentally. Walter was and is a team player. His weapon of choice, his slingshot, is a ranged weapon. So he is always at his best with other players around to be close and take the aggro for him. With Walter's new skill tree, he also has a lot of work to put in to become his most powerful self, landing Walter around here on the graph. The only ranged character available, and honestly a really good one. I love that Klei gave Walter this breath of fresh life, and I'm really excited to see the new Walter mains that are born from it. And finally, the battle grandma herself, Wanda. I'll be honest, she's literally just a hybrid between Wolfgang and Maxwell. She's super useful for a team with infinite revives and the ability to teleport everyone around the map, but also has some of the highest DPS in the entire game. There's really nothing Wanda can't do, despite her meager health and constant bleed effect. Unfortunately, Wanda doesn't come out of the postern as powerful as she can be, and must first delve into the ruins to acquire Thulsite for more timepieces to gain her full potential. But ironically, this task is still easier than the time sink of some of the other characters on this list. So Wanda lands herself right about here, useful in her own chronomancy ways, while also being a phenomenal fighter. And there we have it. This right here is the final graph. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you agree or do you disagree? Hey, while you're down there, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also, YouTube thinks you would like to watch this video next, so I'll see you all there. Bye-bye.